Chapter 21, Hidden Worries. Zhang Xiaofan looked at the middle-aged scholar in front of him, who was none other than the Ghost King, the major threat to the orthodox sects today. His mind was in turmoil. In recent days, he had occasionally harbored doubts about his past beliefs deep in his heart, all stemming from a conversation under a tea stand at the foot of Qingyun Mountain. Now, seeing an old acquaintance again, his emotions were truly complicated, almost causing him to forget the current situation. But even if he forgot, the person next to him wouldn't. Zhou wiped away the blood from the corner of his mouth, struggling to stand up. He whispered to Zhang Xiaofan and Tianyin, "This person's cultivation is too high. We can't confront him head on. I'll hold him off. You two should leave quickly." With that said, he beckoned, and the 7-star sword embedded in the rock wall, which had been trembling slightly, seemed to respond to his call. With a clang, it broke through the wall and flew back into his hand. The Ghost King glanced at Zhou, nodded, still wearing a faint smile on his face. "With your level of cultivation, it seems that among the young disciples of Qingyun Sect, you are the leader." Unexpectedly, besides Zhang Xiaofan, Qingyun Sect also has talents like you. Not bad, not bad. Zhang Xiaofan was startled, but he noticed that both senior sister Tianyin and Zhou were looking at him. His face flushed momentarily, not knowing what to say. Zhou took a deep breath, stepped forward, and the 7-star sword in his hand lit up. However, the Ghost King made no move, just stood there smiling at him. Zhou knew that this person was the strongest enemy he had encountered in his life, but with fellow disciples behind him, he couldn't abandon the fight no matter what. He hoped he could hold him off and let the 2 fellow disciples escape. Unexpectedly, as soon as he tried to channel his energy to control the sword, his internal energy surged suddenly, rushing up from his chest. Unable to endure it any longer, he spurted out a mouthful of blood. Zhang Xiaofan and Tianyin were greatly alarmed and rushed forward to support him. Zhou's face turned pale. He knew that he had been severely injured by the Ghost King's attack, his internal organs and meridians damaged, and he was no longer able to cast spells. He was terrified, partly because he knew he was in a desperate situation, and partly because of the high level of cultivation of this Ghost King, which was truly terrifying. The harm he could cause to the orthodox sects in the future was probably immeasurable. The Ghost King looked at him and suddenly said, "You are struggling to fight me, but you want to delay me for a while to let these 2 fellow disciples escape." Zhou snorted, but didn't answer. Tianyin, on the other hand, stood up and stood in front of him, angrily saying, "Evil demon, don't think your higher cultivation gives you the upper hand. I'm not afraid of you." Zhang Xiaofan was surprised. The Ghost King had wounded Zhou with just 1 strike, and anyone could see that his cultivation was extremely high. Seeing Tianyin's fearless appearance, he couldn't help but feel worried. He stepped forward and pulled her, signaling her not to be too impulsive. Tianyin hadn't reacted yet, but this action had already caught the eyes of the Ghost King and Bai Yao. Bai Yao's face darkened, and she coldly snorted, looking at Tianyin, then at Zhang Xiaofan. Suddenly, she spoke. "Zhang Xiaofan, is this the senior sister Tianyin you always talk about?" Tianyin and Zhou were both surprised. Zhou frowned and said, "Junior brother Zhang, do you know them, father and daughter?" Zhang Xiaofan remained silent for a while before saying softly, "Yes." At this moment, Tianyin suddenly exclaimed, "Ah, I recognize you now. You're that demon girl who sneaked over that night, and later we chased you to the small island outside, saying you were looking for the person with Cfan ... double quotes." She stopped halfway through her words, just staring at Zhang Xiaofan. Zhang Xiaofan's heart was in turmoil. In fact, he had always feared such a situation. Now that it had happened, he still didn't know how to deal with it. The Ghost King stood there, seeing Zhang Xiaofan's complex expression. He still smiled and said, "Zhang Xiaofan, since we parted under Qingyun Mountain's dead spirit abyss, how have you been these days?" Zhang Xiaofan was upset and didn't respond to him. Zhou furrowed his brow tightly, deeply puzzled, seeing the ambiguous expressions between the Ghost King and his daughter. He felt that their relationship was quite unusual. However, Qingyun Sect had strict rules, especially prohibiting interactions with people from the demonic path. He didn't know what relationship this Zhang Jr. brother had with them, but if he violated the sect's rules, it would be very troublesome. But this was not the time to inquire. The three of them were still in dire straits. Zhou barely collected his thoughts and turned to face the Ghost King, about to speak. But the Ghost King glanced at him and preempted. "You are using your true energy to infuse the 7-star sword, intending to hold me back with your remaining strength to give these to fellow disciples a chance to escape." Zhou's body shook, his face ashen. Unexpectedly, the Ghost King's thoughts were so meticulous. With his level of cultivation and the precautions he had taken beforehand, their chances of escape were probably slim. However, the Ghost King smiled and said, "There's no need to despair. I have no intention of making things difficult for you." "What?" Zhou and Tianyin exclaimed in unison, while Zhang Xiaofan also looked surprised. Turning to him, the Ghost King glanced at Bai Yao, then turned to Zhang Xiaofan, smiling. "Zhang Xiaofan, when we parted under Quangshan Mountain, you showed true feelings for Yao in the dead spirit abyss. We've been through life and death together. He had only said half of his words when Zhang Xiaofan's expression changed drastically. He felt the gaze of Zhou and Tianyin and panicked, about to speak. You're talking nonsense. Double quotes. At that moment, Zhang Xiaofan caught Bai Yao's gaze, only to see a hint of melancholy in her clear eyes. Suddenly, he remembered the night of the storm, when the world was solemn, and she was the only one accompanying him through hardships. His heart softened inexplicably, but he couldn't continue speaking. Meanwhile, the Ghost King's words continued. "Moreover, on that day, you also comforted Yao, resolving a knot in our father-daughter relationship over the past decade or so. You could be considered to have done me a favor." He smiled and said, "Today, I'll spare the three of you because of your face, Zhang Xiaofan. But in doing so, when you return to Qingyun, you'll definitely face criticism from those old fogies who can't distinguish right from wrong. Why not join my holy sect? I will definitely treat you well, and you can also be with Yao. Isn't that double quotes?" "Shut up," as Shao interrupted him, and it was Zhang Xiaofan who couldn't bear it anymore, pointing at the Ghost King and shouting, "Come and kill me. Even if I die, I won't join your demonic sect." Tianyin breathed a sigh of relief, clapping her hands. "Well said, Xiaofan." But Zhou, standing beside him, looked at Zhang Xiaofan with a faint frown, his brows still furrowed. The Ghost King shook his head with a smile. "Forget it. Suit yourself. There's plenty of time in the future. Think about it slowly." With that, he pulled Bai Yao and didn't stay any longer, flying out of the cave. In midair, Bai Yao suddenly turned back, looking at Zhang Xiaofan. Seeing the look in her eyes, Zhang Xiaofan, who had been angry just now, felt a sense of loss again.